evening. I'm Jeannie Long, Executive Director, Chicago Collections Consortium. Please note this program will be recorded and will be posted on CCC's website for later viewing. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's conversation with Chicagoland High School poets, Justin Simpson from Kenwood Academy High School, Estelle Wong from William Frem High School, and Nora Want from Jones College Prep, who are just a few of the 2023 winners of CCC's Making History Come Alive Through Words poetry competition. And for those who, and they will be in conversation with Chicago's Poet Laureate, Avery Young. CCC's Making History Come Alive Through Words poetry competition is an annual event hosted in the spring in partnership with the Chicago Public Library and the Chicago Poetry Foundation. We are excited to be able to promote the next year's application. It can be found on CCC's website under our news section. So please check that out. It's open to all Chicagoland High School students. But before we begin, if you're joining us for the first time tonight, Chicago Collections Consortium is a consortium of libraries, museums, and cultural organizations, all working together for the preservation and promotion of Chicago's history and culture. Now, we share our collections through Explore Chicago Collections Portal, which provides free and open access to our members' archival collection. We'd like to begin our program with Chicago Collections Land Acknowledgement Statement, which reads, Chicago Collections Consortium acknowledges and is grateful for the Native peoples who laid the foundation for the city of Chicago, and for the diverse indigenous nations that reside in Chicago today. When you visit our member organizations and when you experience Chicago outdoor spaces, we invite you to join in offering respect and gratitude to the many indigenous peoples that reside in the Chicagoland region, as well as their ancestors. We're pleased to be able to present tonight's program with funding support from the Illinois Humanities. Please go to the Illinois Humanities website to learn more about the fabulous programs being offered throughout the state of Illinois that they are making possible. Thank you, Illinois Humanities. I'd also like to thank CCC's donors shown here, whose generous support allows us to offer unique free programming like the one tonight, in addition to supporting the Explore Chicago Collections portal. We invite you to check out CCC's website to see a complete listing of upcoming programming and to listen in on previous programs and recordings. I know our conversation tonight is going to go by way too quickly, and we're hoping to make time for questions, and they can be posted in the Q&A. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Justin, Estelle, Nora, and Avery to the conversation. So let's begin, Avery, with you as Chicago's first Poet Laureate. Can you tell us a little bit about what that role is, and being the first Poet Laureate for our city, what's all involved?
Sure. Traditionally, a poet laureate is a poet who then is appointed by some branch of, well, not branch of government, but by some city or state to present poems, represent their state as far as poetry. For the most part, you write poems for special occasions in the city, AKA the mayor's inauguration. So I was actually one of the last appointments from former Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and then I got to read a poem to welcome our current mayor, Brandon Johnson, into office. So that was really exciting, and that's the thing in which a poet laureate does: tour the city. One of the duties they would like to see me do is also be a part of inspiring youth to be more involved in poetry and things of that nature. But I see it as a way in which to get the city ignited through all manners of literacy, because I believe poetry isn't this dense set of language that only really deep people can understand. You know, poems are just short stories, and everybody has one. So,
Well, I was laughing before we started because I thought, oh my gosh, we're gonna go past our start time because it was our conversation with everybody was so interesting because, and I wish you would repeat your comments on basically capturing the clear snapshot of history in a time period. You go back and you read the poems from that time period to really understand what people were experiencing and to see that personal perspective too. I thought that was really interesting.
Oh yes, so I was sharing with Justin, Nora, and Estelle that, you know, in 100 years from now, you know, when people will really want to know what happened in 2023, they're gonna go to the poems. They should go to the poems and they'll find the truth. Because poems are written by people and who have who certain things affect our humanity. And so we lend that human experience to a certain event, you know. And like I said, so if they want the truth, they will go to the poets because the poets, again, make the society accountable for the decisions it makes that affect us all. So,
and in that same vein, our poets here who were winners of the Making History Come Alive Through Words went to Chicago Collections, our portal to be inspired by an archival collection to really, be prompted by that moment in history too. So
I love that. That's
yeah.
the work. That's exactly the kind of work that I want to encourage in my platform to get to the city to talk about. I know Mayor Brandon often speaks of the soul of the city, and I think the soul of the city is in the people, the places, and the things that make the city such a great space and shifts the narrative of what people think about Chicago everywhere else. You know, I travel, I travel a lot of places, and when you tell somebody you're from Chicago, they like, they feel like, oh, it's dangerous in Chicago. I go, I'm alive.
Alive and then some, Avery.
And you know, it is so. I think, yeah, I think there's so many stories. So I'm so excited the fact that Justin, Nora, and still got the opportunity, along with so many other students, got the opportunity to go into this collection and look at this plethora of events that happen. Chicago is a really important space in the world, let alone just let alone this state or whatever. It's a very, very important space in the world. We had a world fair here once. Like it's a big deal. It's a big deal. People come from all over the earth to go to the Bean on Michigan Avenue. It's a to hear the blues, right? So I'm not just talking about tourist attractions, but like when I have friends come from London or Japan, I take them over to the Blues Club and we have a good time. I take them over to Maria's and we have a good time. You know what I'm saying? So, it's such an important city, and so writing about it and like I said, the people, the places, the things is exactly what I would like to have happen in my platform as the Laureate. So.
Well, let's dive in with some of the questions. And Estelle, let's start with you. And as we said, if there's between all of you, if there's questions come up, jump in too. So what do you have, Estelle, for Avery?
Originally my question was, what is it like to be a poet laureate? But I kind of wanted to revise it and specify, what is your favorite part of being a poet laureate?
Stuff like this, right?
I don't know yet. So the answer to that question will have to be me. I'm my favorite part. No, seriously. I would think the art that's going to be made during my tenure would be my favorite part, because that's really all I believe I'm only here to do the work. And so, and what I'm working with the city and the Poetry Foundation and also with the library is to have this tenure be an opportunity for a poet or the poet laureate to create a new work, right? That is about the city. So my favorite part will be the work I get to do.
But also that work will be it continues to be so inspirational to Avery for, so many generations to come too, which is really exciting as well. So
yeah. And I easily didn't have to be the first poet laureate. There's Gwendolyn Brooks, there was Kent Foreman, there was Carolyn Rogers. There are poets who are alive and well today. There are the J. Ivies, there are the Eve Ewings, the Jamila Woods. There's so many different people who could have been the first poet laureate. It rests on my shoulders, and like I said, I like to believe that I will do the work to make it a pretty cool thing to be after me. Like, so I'm doing the work for the poets after me, not necessarily for myself.
And it's just a 2-year appointment. So again, that time's going to go by quick. So
yeah, I mean, look, we and January is knocking on the door.
Unfortunately, yes.
January is already knocking on this door. So it is what it is. And then we also gonna have a conversation of what is the actual really acceptable time to even make some level of impact, right? Mm-hmm. As I feel like, and again, this is the first time this has happened, right? So the first year is in my estimate a chance in which for a poet to go off and figure out in residency or sabbatical and create a work that may need to take time in research and drafting and then workshop and then be able to then present that to to the city through schools and libraries and other spaces and places. So we shall see. We shall see. But my favorite part is cooking it all up, Estelle. It's really just cooking it all up.
And doing programs like this, Avery,
right.
Be honest.
And not just it be about me, but it be about a lot of other folk.
Thank you.
And Nora?
Yeah, hi. This question is kind of like, it's kind of more related to like what we were talking about before about like Chicago and Chicago being such a cool place. But I kind of had it can interpret it as silly or as like serious as you want, but what is something you really love about Chicago? I mean, like your favorite pizza place or like something deeper than that. I don't know.
You're not gonna get me in trouble talking about favorite pizza place. You ain't gonna get me in that level of trouble. You're not gonna get me in that level of trouble. I will say this: I like my pizza with extra sauce, so I'll say that. I like it saucy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be mild sauce, but I like it extra saucy. I like the music. I think Chicago has some like the best music to offer, in its past, in its presence, and it only makes me excited for its future. I mean, like I said, from Muddy Waters to Vic Mensa, Rick Wilson, Jamila, is No Name. It's so many. Shaka Khan, Quincy Jones. It's so many. It's musical legacy is so rich. Mama Mavis Staples was like my favorite singer in the whole world, from Chicago. So its music is probably my favorite aspect. Growing up on the west side of Chicago, I go down North Avenue and you can hear V103 from the liquor store. You could hear gospel music from the storefront church, and you could hear rap music from the restaurant, and just being able to walk through that tunnel of sound, right, on North Avenue when I was coming up, was like, wow, there's like no place like this in the world. Because I've been a number of places, and I walk down those streets and don't get that sound design, right? And so music is definitely one of my favorites. And outside of music, I would say the art, the design, is architecture. Currently, I'm one of 4 directors of the Floating Museum, and we are the artistic directors of the Chicago Architecture Biennial. And again, that just made me fall in love all over again with buildings, like some of the most beautiful buildings in this city and the world are like just the field houses of the parks. They're like the libraries. You're like, wow, this you go to some libraries and you like look up. It's like, yo, this is a library. This is a library. So yes, it's between the music and its architecture. It's one of my favorite parts of the city.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Justin, you're up.
I feel like my question is a bit more serious now that I heard everybody else's. But my question is, how do you think we can use poetry to like help the communities that we see around Chicago? It's like the West Side communities, East Side, North Side, South Side. How do you think we can use poetry to like help bring those communities together?
Okay. And I'll try to answer that question in the seriousness in which it was given. Oh, anyway, I mean, poets write about what's outside of their window. And if I write a poem about what's outside of my window, then some attention is paid to what is outside of my window. And then that can initiate some level of advocacy and or concern and or care about what's happening outside of my window. So in that respects, poetry is helpful in the sense that it brings attention to an experience a person be having that nobody gets to understand or see, because that's not what's on the news tonight, right? Or tomorrow night. But in that same vein, a poem is not policy, right? It can influence, or it can motivate and inspire the people who make laws and do the work that brings forth real equity and change in our neighborhoods. But it's a poem, and it's necessary because it is. I think I heard somebody. I wish I can remember the name of this poet, because I want to say this quote. But it said something about it makes the murk magical, right? It turns the murk into magic. And so all of those hardships, it makes magic out of it through language. And it's powerful, because I can take something and spin it joy, right? I can write a poem about Madison Avenue or even Madison and Costa, that intersection, and paint it in a way that people think it's a masterpiece. People think of it as a Mona Lisa. And to me, that benefits the community, because it gets somebody to thinking that something else happens there, as opposed to what they see on the news or what they, Chicago just isn't so negative as people like to say it is. But at the same time, that poem gets people to thinking on our municipal powers into thinking, what can they do to enrich those communities that they represent?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Justin.
And Justin, we'll go back to you. What else do you have for Avery?
Well, another question I have is, can you see this platform growing, and what do you hope to see for it in the future?
I would like that the tenure of the laureate be an opportunity for the laureate to create a new work about the city of Chicago, then spend another length amount of time sharing that new work with not just Chicago, but the world. So I see this platform as that, and not just the laureate. I would like to see that from their programs that allow other artists to do the same thing. I think it's important. I think international travel is important. So I would like to see an opportunity for an exchange between a poet and in Chicago and a musician somewhere, maybe France, Poland, or wherever. And they do a piece of work together that is presented in both spaces. So I would like to see, I would like the presence of poetry to be more, or like poetry to be more present in the city. Have it on billboards, have it on the news at night, and in the newspapers and in the magazines. That's not just designated to literary magazines, right? So we have poets and writers. We have magazines that are. We have Poetry Magazine. It's like here, but like. I think one of the coolest things about being a poet laureate, I was on the front page of the Sun-Times, and I ain't never seen that in my life, right? and I remember my mom was saying, "Well, what did you do?" I became a poet. That's all I did, Mama. That's all I promise. I promise. But like. They open up the newspaper and see like this really cool poem from a Justin Simpson. You know what I'm saying, or Dora or Estelle. Yeah, see one of you all's work up on this big 40 by 80 billboard alongside a building as people are traveling throughout the various neighborhoods. I want to make sure that like poetry, what can we do as a city to implement language and poems so that poems become a bit more accessible. They're not stuck in these academic institutions, and their poems should be our neighbors. Come on now, Avery R. Young. And that's a quote directly from me. Should be our neighbors.
So I get what you mean. I really agree. Like bringing poetry and making it center front stage and using it as a way to paint the city in a way that's like in a better light than people see it now.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Because that's what it does. I was one of the first teaching artists, or we were in our 20s. We had two in front of our age at this point where we all was just like, look, we want to create a youth slam. And that became louder than the bomb. And it was really because it was like we need to give people or youth a platform to tell what they experience in the city. And then people will think about it because people hear adults talk all the time, right? And when you're an adult listening to another adult, you give yourself the space, yourself the space to agree and or disagree. But something switches when you hear it from the viewpoint of someone who's younger or the youth. And it's not about what you agree or disagree with. It's about what you've just learned. Because that youth or that young person just gave you a very different perspective. Because again, that vantage point of the world is is a vantage point that as an adult you don't have. And so then when somebody shares something with you and it makes you think of something different, I know that people I know people or young folks on the West Side had no idea that they can be sharing the same experience as people like at North Side Prep. But they went to Lowndes Bond and found out, yeah, they do. Right? Or in After School Matters, just a whole bunch of ways in which the city has supported the voices of its youth is really, really important because, like I said, that is what's going to actually shift the culture. Because again, adults don't do. I was about to cuss. They do nothing but argue with each other all the time. We looking at that right now in the news. They don't do nothing but argue and fight each other all the time, right? And it's usually someone younger than us, or that future that says to us, that makes us pause and really think about what are we doing to shape the world for people who got to grow in it. So it's very, very, very important to highlight the voices of the young.
Well, and just to interject in Justin's comment about building community too, I mean, what was so interesting for us when we hosted this poetry competition were, the students here tonight representing different schools, but sharing their creative work and their experience in such profound ways through their poems. So no, I loved your comments about how to build community and the role as the poet laureate and working with other, countries even in that way and further developing that, Avery. But yeah, I think even if we start small, just with gathering different high schools with events that we've had,
yes.
it's really awesome that way just to have that engagement.
Yeah, I mean, again, the work that you all are doing with Chicago Collections is so important because, again, it allows that this history not be buried, but it also and by again young people going into this vault, right? You get to highlight this history, but it's also the way in which this city will meet George Jetson. And when I say meets George Jetson, I mean go into the future. I guess it's a reference to the cartoon, The Jetsons, which took us all into the future. Actually, I just did a poem about that. The cartoon was set in 2063. Isn't that crazy? In 1963, they wrote a cartoon about what the world would be in 2063. That is 4 decades from now, right? Which isn't really that long of a time, right? Which isn't that long of a time. And it was amazing to see what they thought would happen with these flying cars and these homes that were built on top of stilts and and things that they do, the robots and all of the stuff that they imagined the world. But even in that imagination in the world in 1963, it really wasn't equitable still, right? And what you all get to do in those collections or in those archives at Chicago Collections, you really get to present and challenge what happened in the past so that we do have an equitable future. That the fruit from Estelle, Nora, and Justin, you all will experience a world based on the work that me and my cohort has done, and you all are going to do some work for that youth after you, right? And it'll continue to be that way, but we gotta fix it. We gotta imagine it. We gotta imagine it new. We just can't have it and it be the same old messed up way. See, I'm stopping myself from cussing because I'm Uncle Avery a cusser. Look, I'm cute. I'm doing a good job.
Got my finger on mute, Avery.
I'm doing a really, really, really good job.
Yeah.
Anyway, but if anything, that's gonna be my favorite part. It keeps me from not doing all that cussing I do. But either way, like you all, the past teaches us so much so that we can modify the future. So I'm excited to hear these poems that you all even wrote from the collections.
Nora, what do you have for Avery?
Yeah, this is kind of like, again, a little broad, but it was more like going into like the youth. What kind of advice would you have for any like young people wanting to write or like wanting to get more into writing, poetry or anything or music?
Yeah. I'll tell you all what I told Jamila Woods first time I met her. And so I was actually subbing. I was subbing for Marlon Escara, I believe, over at YCA. It was a workshop, and I think for like the exercise was write a haiku, and everybody wrote a haiku, and then we shared the haiku and got around to Jamila, and I just like, well, dang, really good. And my advice to her was never stop writing, and then that's been my advice to everybody. Never stop writing. I made a decision a long time ago that writing would be what I do. And I didn't do it with the intent that I would be a poet laureate or whatever. I did it with the intent that, wow, I get to paint worlds with the language that, even my cuss words, I get to do that. I get to do that. I get to do that. Oh, I like this job. I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. And so I kept doing it. And there's plenty of people out here with the same occupation. There's Terrence Hayes, there's Christopher Franklin, there's so many. There's Dinesh, Eve. I say there's so, and not just poetry, right? You have comic strips and movies, TV, film. J. Ivy is the first spoken word Grammy winning spoken word poet coming straight from the Chi. So I mean, it's the opportunities are boundless, but the opportunities won't come if you stop writing. So I say never stop writing. That's just do the work. And now outside of that, never stop writing. That's one set of 3 words, and do the work is the other set of 3 words.
Yeah, I agree. And there's like also that quote that's like, you can't edit like a blank page or whatever. And sometimes like I struggle with like writer's block, and I'm like, wait, I just have to write something down, and like, so that goes with like never stop writing,
When so describe writer's block. I'm gonna try to help do writer's block.
Well, sometimes like it's just like being really uninspired, and like sometimes I'm just like everything I write feels like wrong, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. Like everything.
No, it makes totally sense. So then the challenge is not to write things that are right.
Yeah, right? For sure.
The challenge you should have with yourself is to create something that can only come out of your hand, and allow yourself the time that it takes for it to come out of your hand. So it's not necessarily writer's block. Writer's block is just a pause, right? A pause that you have to take to hear something. So if you get into that situation where you're looking at this blank page and you're like, oh, what am I doing? You take the pause and you listen. And what I've done, especially with my work, that also helped me through those points where like the language just wasn't showing up, or I wasn't necessarily satisfied with what was coming onto the page was, I was like, oh, I'm going to use other materials. So if the words stop, an image may show up. So draw, poem, sing, find a crayon. Find a crayon and start coloring the lines, and then the words will come, because now you're giving the language to this yellow that you've placed on the paper. Now you're giving this language to this orange that you've placed on the paper, and it can literally be the things that are yellow, the things that are orange, the things that are green. This could guide you through this piece, and you don't necessarily have that block, as you say. But and also, Nora, stop saying it as a block. That's negative language. You never do positive with negative language, right? So it's a pause that you have to take in order to hear the next word. So that's what writers.
It's a rest.
It's a writer's pause. Yes.
Writer's pause.
So there's writer's pause. And that's what we're gonna do. That's what we're gonna walk forth, and that's what the term we're gonna use from now on. It's a writer's pause.
If you can coin that as a poet laureate.
I sure can. I'll make a t-shirt.
You should.
That's it. Yeah, more money. You all are fun. I like it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Estelle?
I did have a question, but I wanted to add to the part about writer's pause. And I know that the way I've framed like what it was like writer's block, like I've reframed it as more of like, sometimes it's important, it's like a sign that the story that you're writing might need a little more thought put into it, and sometimes you're not in the position to fully tell that story, and it's an opportunity to experience more life, to do more research, but to not force the words to come out, because like forcing the words to come out can feel like it makes writing feel like a chore, and that's, I feel like when writing feels like a chore, that's what blocks creativity.
Thank you. Right. It shouldn't feel like a chore, but I do say that it is work. that it is work, and some of the work is working through those moments. And again, sometimes you have to pause, go live some life, experience a thing, go eat some ice cream, or jump on your bed and sing and sing a Good Eartha Kitt song. I don't know. Sometimes it takes you to do a thing and experience a thing to go back to a poem and continue it, or set it to the side. Like, okay, you're not doing the thing right now. I'm gonna holler at something. I'm gonna holler at something else. I think, look, a lot of my work is project based, so I don't really just start off just out of the air, pulling things out of the air. It's usually based on something that's happened in history or is happening now, or a particular object and a particular person. So I always have like this groundwork. I do a lot of outlining before I do a project, and then again, the work then doesn't become making it up as I go. The work becomes listening, because I've already kind of decided what I was going to do, right? So I think that's a very different approach, but I do it like that to keep the work intention forward. Like, there's intention in the work that I do. I wrote Emmett Till the remix because I wanted a classroom of 7th and 8th grade boys to understand what happened to Emmett Till, right? And I wasn't going to stop until that poem was written by it. But I had that intention, and I knew what I knew what that poem was going to do. So again, all I had to do at that point, once I had made all those decisions, was just to listen and let the words flow, because they come. They you know, the more you're in the practice of listening to that language, the more it never leaves you at all, you know. But you put yourself into that practice. You got to put yourself in the practice and keep yourself in that practice. That's why I say never stop writing.
That's really interesting.
So to my actual question, I wanted to hear what was your journey into like becoming more involved with writing? Like,
I just like poems. I just like my exposure to poetry. When I saw works from Sonia Sanchez, I was just like, wow. And Baba Haki, Mahabuti. When I saw that work on page, I was like, this is like, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. My first poem was written because I felt like, I had to advocate for myself, because I felt like I was in a situation where no one would advocate for me. And me and my mouth, my cuss words, got me in trouble. But when I wrote a poem, what I had been, yapping out about, people were like, wow, that's beautiful. And I was like, oh, okay, all I gotta do is turn this straight up, like dragging someone for filth into a poem. That's all I gotta do. And then people, like, not only would they listen, but would say it was beautiful. Right? So when someone says your work is beautiful, it's not just they heard it. It was like they was engaged in something about what was shared, made them think a way about something that had some kind of emotional, some emotional effort in it. And like, to do that, or and do that well, to paint with language to a point where somebody goes, oh, that's beautiful. I was like, okay, I can keep doing this. I'll work on this some more, and I'll keep doing it. And I'm always working on it. Like, being a poet laureate of anything don't mean that I gotta stop working at writing poems. Right? I was talking to the poet laureate of Illinois, who was Angela Jackson, and I was like, Mama Angela, do you feel the pressure to write better poems? And she was like, you must. like, no, you must write like the best poetry of your life. You're the friggin' laureate, you know what I'm saying? It's like you gotta like write and earn your earn your keep, So it's no pressure at all in that sense. But like I said, the work is I still have to work at poems. I still have to work at this thing that can only come out of my hands, right? So I can't be content with the level of poetry that I'm writing. I always got to figure out the ways in which to push it forward. And at this point, it's fun. The day it don't be fun, or as you say, it's still, the day it becomes like a chore. I figure out something else to do. I open up a restaurant, sell donuts. I'll fry donuts in the morning and sell them for an exuberant amount of money. Yeah, the Laureate donuts. Yes, the Laureate donuts.
No, but it's interesting when you talk about work, because as a non-poet, when I read poetry, I think, it's all emotion. It's all emotion. But the creative weave of taking that approach and what, will go into high school student poets here and their poems, but to be inspired to work at your writing, and then to have that emotional draw for the reader too. I mean, it's a lot, but
it's a lot, especially if you decide that you're going to be a poet who's not going to write a poem that somebody else wrote. Right.
right.
If you're gonna be because that's easy to do. That's easy to write what you've been hearing. It's a way more work when you decide that you're going to invent language. You're gonna put words together that you don't see in union as much, right? You're going to figure out the way to say a red car without using any of those words, right?
I get scared though of that vulnerability of, because you have to be vested, and this is for Estelle, Nora, and Justin too. Like, you got to open yourself up too. I mean, obviously you're in control of how much you want to open up in, but that's, maybe on the creative side.
Sometimes you're not though.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're not in control, and to me, that's the best poem. The poem you're not in control of. I say, Nora, if you stop trying to control the poem, sometimes you got to let go of that need to control a poem, right? And you become the most vulnerable when you relinquish the control. I don't necessarily think being a poet is controlling language as much as I believe is curating it. Right? You gather up this language and you go, okay, cool. I'm gonna put you here, I'm gonna put you here, I'm gonna put you here, I'm gonna put you there, and I'm gonna put, let me switch that up. That's what to me a poet is doing. A poet is not you over there. It's
selection.
Right. It's not about control, right? It's it's not necessarily about control. So a lot of it is your, like I said, you're relinquishing it, and you're listening, because if you're in a state of like control, it blocks what you need to hear, because you want then what you want to hear, not what is there, right? And so just keep that in mind, that like it still says, it's not to be a chore. Right? And if it's not a chore, then it is rooted in passion. And you don't get to passion if you never learn how to relinquish and release. You never get to that space. You never get to that space.
How about we share some of the poems?
About time.
Yeah.
That's what I came here for. I ain't come do all this yik yakking. I ain't come here to do all this yik yakking. I come to hear some poems. Yes, indeed, from Kenwood. And I ain't never heard of school. Still, what school is this?
William From's High School. It's not in Chicago.
What, say the last name again?
William From's High School.
Oh, Friend. Okay, Friend. Okay. Like I said, I've heard of Kenwood and Jones Prep. So yeah, that I'm excited. Come on, Chicago's blood.
Yeah, because it was all of Chicagoland too, so we had a far reach. We're going to kick it off with Justin. Would you like to read your poem, please?
Yep.
And also talk about your source of inspiration too. I mean, you were inspired by a finding aid as well.
Mm-hmm. So my poem Chicago's Blood was inspired by me basically like looking at pictures of Chicago in the 1900s and seeing like, the way they were so segregated and like the city was diverse, but at the same time it was segregated and sectioned off. And I realized like, after some research that this was because of redlining. So I wanted to make my poem based on that and like the effect that it might have had on different communities of color. So it's called Chicago's Blood. It starts off like, placed in broken up sections of what should be a happy home. Then break the spirit like a raw bone. The kitchenette then breaks, burning crosses at the stake. Ashes and black blood flow into the lake, the same blood that redlined us. On the documents, the same red that undermined us. Coax me, kill me, cash me, anything to get past me. Redlining, redlining. Red summer, city bloodstained, no more the Yankees. My dear stoned in the waves down under. Black churches tinted red but not of wine. The religion returned to is not sanctified. Black people ain't meant to burn. Redlining, redlining. The kitchenette's burnt out. Throw those blacks to the south side, they can all drown in Bronzeville. Let them croak where they reside. Bronze tinted Black Haven, of course they're gonna hate it. We ought to fight their craft beer martini bars to save it. But it's awful too late for saving. They preyed on this land since they threw it at our feet to start grazing. Lease me, loot me, let me die out. No health centers or recreation centers, so the boys are always out. Bloodshed is all about. The grand plan. Turn into a war zone before we clear it out. This is the modern day, redlining, redlining. We up the stake more than twofold. 134% up, we're no Lincoln Park, but we sure struck gold. Man, the story never gets old. Uninvest and reinvest. By the power vested in me, we shall see the Bronzeville one day feel more white than actual bronze. More salad bars with croutons, fewer schools, and even less help for those we deem far gone. But which road should we place this bar on? Redlining, redlining.
Thank you, Justin. Estelle?
The poem that I wrote was called The Year of the Dragon in Chinatown, and I was inspired by the photograph that's pictured on the screen right now that was taken in, I believe, like the year 2000, which happened to be the Year of the Dragon. And I chose to write about Chinatown because of its significance to Chinese Americans in Chicago. Chinatown, Chinatown, Chinatown. I repeat your name like a praying chant. You started as a refuge carved out for shunned immigrants, and now you are home to those near and far. Your name evokes a heritage of a persistent people whose legacy was born across the stars. Chinatown, Chinatown, Chinatown. I repeat your name like a praying chant. Here you are now. You take the form of a lion's dance, flowing like the movements of a fierce rushing river. You grant the fortune of another lunar year's chance. Chinatown, Chinatown, Chinatown. I repeat your name like a praying chant. You forged an identity out of contradictions as a representation of the spirit of both old and new, where the worlds of East and West intersect, yet constantly you blended and bridged the two. Chinatown, Chinatown, Chinatown. I repeat your name like a praying chant, for you breathe like a living dragon. Your heart pounds with the bustle of people and business. You sing the metaphors of 100 different tongues. Your blood roars with ancient history and cultural richness. Chinatown, 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 repeated 5 times and more. I realize such is truth. You are community to the world, a home for all, for the elders and the youth.
Thank you, Estelle. Nora?
Yeah, so I wrote this poem based on this image of people celebrating after the moon landing, and like I kind of went not a very conventional route where I kind of imagined like a world where like I just imagined this story of this kid who's like in a kind of a bad home, and then like I kind of thought about like the idea of like looking towards the future when we still have so much to like repair like in the past, and like we have so much to repair before we move forward, and we have to look at the past to like move to the future, and it's about like women's rights and like just general like oppression. So somewhere up there in the swirling void is a man doing the impossible. He bounds over mountains and craters carved into the moon's face from millions of years of solitude. But somewhere down here, a child screams, and when the day ends, the balloons fall back down to earth. My mother goes back to her ironing, and my father lights another cigar before sprinkling the ashes onto a carpet she has to clean. The TV flickers to life and Armstrong yells, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." My father cuffs me on the back of the head before leaving for the Galway Arms like he does after every Bears game, win or lose, leaving me and my mom to keep food warm so when he staggers home, he can eat. Mom looks up at the sky, up to the sky, at the window, up to the sky, and I know what she's thinking. She's wondering if life is better up there, and if another universe she gets a degree in, someone else makes her dinner. I don't tell her that it's she who's doing the impossible in the swirling void. She bounds over my brother's grave and holes in the pavement. She patches up my scraped knees and weathers my father's heavy hand and heart. Somewhere down here is a woman doing the impossible. 30 years later, when my father has died from congestive heart failure, I will drive my mother to the community college and she will enroll in Astronomy 101.
Thank you. And as I had shared before, we have these posted on Chicago Collections website where they'll live, and we proudly display them, and we'll also post the recording too. We do have a question.
Tours that all the work was taking us through, right? And what if somebody what if the Chicago tours, right, were poets writing the tours as opposed to the script that they tell, well, over the left there's a building, da 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 da, and those poems were such tour scripts, I would say. The twists and the turns, all of those things that you have to do to maneuver and navigate through the city were right there in those poems. Beautiful work, y'all. Beautiful work. Keep writing. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't say it. Ask anybody. Ask anybody Avery, our youngest talk. They will tell you.
Well, we're quite proud of
I love it.
All of you.
No wonder
Avery.
why you all are sitting here as winners. This is beautiful work.
Yeah.
Beautiful work. Beautiful work.
Look forward to hearing more too. We
Yes,
do
it's
have one
almost-
question in
Yes.
the Q&A.
Yes.
And it asks the question, what does the more practical work look like of the Poet Laureate? I know you spoke to that. And as an audience community, what can we do to also help you in doing the work for the next Poet Laureate?
Oh, I only got 2 minutes to answer that question.
Yes.
And that is those are answers I really can't get to until I do more of the work to know what I actually need help in doing. So I look forward for this to be an exploration and to find the answers of those particular questions.
We'll know that you made many new friends tonight, and we're here to help in any way. And we'll look forward to not only following you, Avery, but Estelle, Nora, and Justin too. I mean, we'll look forward to hearing more. So really, thank you for all of you making time. Thanks for our listeners tonight. Thank you to the Illinois Humanities too.